Unconscious virtues. All the human qualities of which we are conscious, and especially those whose visibility and obviousness to others too we take for granted, are subject to altogether different laws of development than are those qualities which we know either badly or not at all, and which also conceal themselves by means of their subtlety, even from very subtle observers, knowing how to hide, as it were, behind nothing at all. It is similar with the subtle sculptures on the scales of reptiles. It would be very wrong to take them for ornaments and weapons, for they become visible only under a microscope, under an artificially sharpened eye, that similar animals for which these little sculptures might signify ornaments or weapons simply lack. Our visible moral qualities, and especially those we believe to be visible, follow their own course. And the invisible ones that have the same names but are in relation to other men, neither ornaments nor weapons, also follow their own course. And they probably have lines, subtleties, and sculptures that might give pleasure to a god with a divine microscope. Thus we have, for example, our industry, our ambition, our acuteness. All the world knows about that. But in addition to all that, we probably also have our industry, our ambition, our acuteness. But for these reptile scales, no microscope has been invented as yet. At this point, the friends of instinctive morality will say, "Bravo! At least he considers unconscious virtues possible, and that suffices us." Oh, you are satisfied with so little. Our eruptions. Countless things that humanity acquired in earlier stages, but so feebly and embryonically that nobody could perceive this acquisition, suddenly emerge into the light much later, perhaps after centuries. Meanwhile, they have become strong and ripe. Some ages seem to lack altogether some talent or virtue, as certain individuals do too. But just wait for their children and grandchildren, if you have time to wait that long. They bring to light what was hidden in their grandfathers, and what their grandfathers themselves did not suspect. Often the son already betrays his father, and the father understands himself better after he has a son. All of us harbor concealed gardens and plantlings. And to use another metaphor, we are all of us growing volcanoes that approach the hour of their eruption. But how near or distant that is, nobody knows, not even God. A kind of atavism. I prefer to understand the rare human beings of an age as suddenly emerging late ghosts of past cultures and their powers, as atavisms of a people and its mores. That way one can really understand a little about them. Now they seem strange, rare, extraordinary, and whoever feels these powers in himself must nurse, defend, honor, and cultivate them against another world that resists them, until he becomes either a great human being or a mad and eccentric one, or perishes early. Formerly, these same qualities were common, and therefore considered common, not distinguished. Perhaps they were demanded or presupposed. In any case, it was impossible to become great through them, if only because they involved no danger of madness or solitude. It is preeminently in the generation and castes that conserve a people that we encounter such recrudescences of old instincts, while such atavisms are improbable wherever races, habits, and valuations change too rapidly. For tempo is as significant for the development of peoples as it is in music. In our case, an andante of development is altogether necessary as the andante of a passionate and slow spirit. And that is, after all, the value of the spirit of conservative generations. Consciousness. Consciousness is the last and latest development of the organic, and hence also what is most unfinished and unstrong. Consciousness gives rise to countless errors that lead an animal or man to perish sooner than necessary, exceeding destiny, as Homer puts it. If the conserving association of the instincts were not so very much more powerful, and if it did not serve on the whole as a regulator, humanity would have to perish of its misjudgments and its fantasies with open eyes, of its lack of thoroughness and its credulity, in short, of its consciousness. Rather, without the former, humanity would have long disappeared. Before a function is fully developed and mature, it constitutes a danger to the organism, and it is good if during the interval it is subject to some tyranny. Thus, consciousness is tyrannized, not least by our pride in it. One thinks that it constitutes the kernel of man, what is abiding, eternal, ultimate, and most original in him. One takes consciousness for a determinate magnitude. One denies its growth and its intermittences. One takes it for the unity of the organism. This ridiculous overestimation and misunderstanding of consciousness has the very useful consequence that it prevents an all too fast development of consciousness. Believing that they possess consciousness, men have not exerted very much to acquire it. And things haven't changed much in this respect. To this day, the task of incorporating knowledge and making it instinctive is only beginning to dawn on the human eye, and it is not yet clearly discernible. It is a task that is seen only by those who have comprehended that so far we have incorporated only our errors, and that all our consciousness relates to errors. On the aim of science. What? The aim of science should be to give men as much pleasure as possible and as little displeasure as possible? But what if pleasure and displeasure were so tied together that whoever wanted to have as much as possible of one must also have as much as possible of the other? That whoever wanted to learn to jubilate up to the heavens would also have to be prepared for despair unto death? And this is how things may well be. At least the Stoics believed that this is how things were. And they were consistent when they also desired as little pleasure as possible in order to get as little displeasure as possible out of life. When they kept saying, "The virtuous man is the happiest man," this was both the school's eye-catching sign for the great mass and a casuistic subtlety for the subtle. To this day, you have the choice, either as little displeasure as possible, painless and brief, and in the last analysis, socialists and politicians of all parties have no right to promise their people more than that, or as much displeasure as possible as the price for the growth of an abundance of subtle pleasures and joys that have rarely been relished yet. If you decide for the former and desire to diminish and lower the level of human pain, you also have to diminish and lower the level of their capacity for joy. Actually, science can promote either goal. So far, it may still be better known for its power of depriving man of his joys and making him colder, more like a statue, more stoic. But it might yet be found to be the great dispenser of pain. And then its counterforce might be found at the same time, its immense capacity for making new galaxies of joy flare up. On the doctrine of the feeling of power. Benefiting and hurting others are ways of exercising one's power upon others. That is all one desires in such cases. One hurts those whom one wants to feel one's power, for pain is a much more efficient means to that end than pleasure. Pain always raises the question about its origin, while pleasure is inclined to stop with itself without looking back. We benefit and show benevolence to those who are already dependent on us in some way, which means they are used to thinking of us as cause. We want to increase their power because in that way we increase ours. Or we want to show them how advantageous it is to be in our power. That way they will become more satisfied with their condition and more hostile to and willing to fight against the enemies of our power. Whether benefiting or hurting others involves sacrifices for us does not affect the ultimate value of our actions. Even if we offer our lives, as martyrs do for their church, this is a sacrifice that is offered for our desire for power. Those who feel, I possess truth, how many possessions would they not abandon in order to save this feeling? What would they not throw overboard to stay on top, which means above the others who lack the truth? Certainly the state in which we hurt others is rarely as agreeable, in an unadulterated way, as that in which we benefit others. It is a sign that we are still lacking power, or it shows a sense of frustration in the face of this poverty. It is accompanied by new dangers and uncertainties for what power we do not possess, and clouds our horizon with the prospect of revenge, scorn, punishment, and failure. It is only for the most irritable and covetous devotees of the feeling of power that it is perhaps more pleasurable to imprint the seal of power on a recalcitrant brow. Those for whom the sight of those who are already subjected, the objects of benevolence, is a burden and boredom. What is decisive is how one is accustomed to spice one's life. It is a matter of taste, whether one prefers the slow or the sudden, the assured or the dangerous and audacious increase of power. One seeks this or that spice depending on one's temperament. An easy prey is something contemptible for proud natures. They feel good only at the sight of unbroken men, who might become their enemies, and at the sight of all possessions that are hard to come by. Against one who is suffering, they are often hard, because he is not worthy of their aspirations and pride. But they are doubly obliging toward their peers, whom it would be honorable to fight if the occasion should ever arise. Spurred by the good feeling of this perspective, the members of the knightly caste became accustomed to treating each other with exquisite courtesy. Pity is the most agreeable feeling among those who have little pride and no prospects of great conquests. For them, easy prey, and that is what all who suffer are, is enchanting. Pity is praised as the virtue of prostitutes. The things people call love. Avarice and love. What different feelings these two terms evoke. Nevertheless, it could be the same instinct that has two names. One depreciated by those who have, in whom the instinct has calmed down to some extent, and who are afraid for their possessions. And the other time seen from the point of view of those who are not satisfied, but still thirsty, and who therefore glorify the instinct as good. Our love of our neighbor, is it not a lust for new possessions? And likewise our love of knowledge, of truth, and altogether any lust for what is new. Gradually, we become tired of the old, of what we safely possess, and we stretch out our hands again. Even the most beautiful scenery is no longer assured of our love after we have lived in it for 3 months. And some more distant coast attracts our avarice. Possessions are generally diminished by possession. Our pleasure in ourselves tries to maintain itself by again and again changing something new into ourselves. That is what possession means. To become tired of some possession means tiring of ourselves. One can also suffer of an excess. The lust to throw away or to distribute can also assume the honorary name of love. When we see somebody suffer, we like to exploit this opportunity to take possession of him. Those who become his benefactors and pity him, for example, do this and call the lust for a new possession that he awakens in them love. And the pleasure they feel is comparable to that aroused by the prospect of a new conquest. Sexual love betrays itself most clearly as a lust for possession. The lover desires unconditional and sole possession of the person for whom he longs. He desires equally unconditional power over the soul and over the body of the beloved. He alone wants to be loved and desires to live and rule in the other soul as supreme and supremely desirable. If one considers that this means nothing less than excluding the whole world from a precious good, from happiness and enjoyment, if one considers that the lover aims at the impoverishment and deprivation of all competitors and would like to become the dragon guarding his golden hoard, as the most inconsiderate and selfish of all conquerors and exploiters, if one considers finally that to the lover himself the whole rest of the world appears indifferent, pale, and worthless, and he is prepared to make any sacrifice, to disturb any order, to subordinate all other interests, then one comes to feel genuine amazement that this wild avarice and injustice of sexual love has been glorified and deified so much in all ages. Indeed, that this love has furnished the concept of love as the opposite of egoism, while it may actually be the most ingenious expression of egoism. At this point, linguistic usage has evidently been formed by those who did not possess, but desired.